Here is a rewritten version of your scene with a smoother narrative flow, sharper pacing, and elevated tension, perfect for a dramatic voiceover or narration style. Script: Jesse Watters thought it would be just another easy segment, another night, another face to challenge, then cut off before they could land a real point. But that's not what happened. Not this time. From the moment Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett appeared on screen, something shifted. No small talk, no warm-up, just silence and then fire. She didn't raise her voice, didn't lean forward, didn't blink too much. But within 2 minutes, she'd taken control. Watters sat upright, chin slightly raised, eyes fixed on the monitor, exuding that trademark Fox News blend of smirk and condescension. Across the split screen, Jasmine adjusted her earpiece with the kind of poise that makes people nervous. And then she let him talk just long enough. His opening monologue framed voting rights as a radical left-wing play, pandering to criminal justice activists. When he finished, Jasmine tilted her head, just slightly. That's not only inaccurate, Jesse, it's lazy. The pause after that cut through the studio like a blade. His eyebrow twitched. She didn't wait. If you're going to bring up voting access and criminal justice in the same breath, she said, voice level and steady, you better come with more than recycled talking points, and that was it. The shift. Jesse tried to interrupt her once, twice, 3 times, but she didn't budge. No shouting, no grand gestures, just a relentless stream of facts. Do you know how many polling locations were removed in black communities across Texas last election? She asked. Silence. Hundreds. She answered herself. Do you know what percentage of police brutality claims are dismissed without review? Over 95%. So Jesse, are you asking about legislation, or are you performing? Even the studio crew fell still. The usual satellite delay made live TV feel jagged, but this wasn't awkward. This was electric. Watters' jaw tensed, eyes flicked, off-screen, maybe toward a producer, maybe toward escape. He tried to regain footing. That's quite a speech, he muttered, smile forced. I gave you a real answer, she replied. You just weren't ready to hear it. Tension thickened. Viewers felt it through the screen. Twitter caught fire within seconds. Clips circulated before the segment ended. Crockett just cooked Jesse live. She brought facts while he brought vibes. Notice how the calmest person in the room had the most power. Jesse stumbled forward, called her combative. She smiled. You call it combative when a black woman corrects you with facts. That's telling. And right there she struck a nerve. Not just on screen, but across a country that knows what it means to be dismissed, to be doubted, to be expected to back down. As the segment ended, Jesse's closing line was clipped, defensive. Jasmine. She leaned back, unfazed. Someone in the control room forgot to cut to commercial. A deep breath was caught on a hot mic. The raw footage leaked. A producer dropped the uncut version. Someone captioned it, Crockett, 1 Watters, 0, by midnight, 2 million views. By morning, trending everywhere. But what most people didn't see was what happened before the cameras rolled. 6 hours earlier, Jesse Watters was pacing behind Studio 5B in Manhattan Beach. He was jumpy, short with staff, unusually nervous. His phone kept buzzing with updates, producer notes, bullet points, cherry-picked stats. He'd read the briefing. Jasmine Crockett, first-term Congresswoman, lawyer, Texas, sharp, unshakable. He wasn't worried. He'd tangled with sharper tongues. He had his playbook, push, prod, provoke. It always worked. She's just another one looking for airtime, he muttered as he adjusted his blazer. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Jasmine sat alone in a quiet prep room. No theatrics, navy blazer, clean makeup, no entourage. Her assistant Tasha flashed cue cards with voter suppression, data and amendments to H.R. 7892. Jasmine barely looked. She already knew. She knew what Jesse would say. Knew how he'd try to frame the bill. Soft on crime, radical agenda. Buzzwords over substance. Same playbook, different day. Let him, she said quietly. Not out of anger but wariness. She was tired of having to pre-defend her intelligence. Tired of the polite smirks. Tired of being talked over. Jesse came from Philadelphia suburbs private schools. Internships handed down through media families. He wasn't cruel, he just never had to fight to be heard. Jasmine came from Shreveport. She remembered walking her little brother past police cruisers, clutching his hand tighter. Her law degree wasn't for decoration, it was armor. Every panel, every broadcast, every interview, it wasn't performance. It was survival. They spoke different languages. They lived different realities. Back in the studio, Jesse's mic check rapped. A producer leaned in. Stay calm. She's sharp, but don't let her spin it. He nodded, already rehearsing his first jab, something about liberals ignoring real crime. Jasmine, meanwhile, inserted her earpiece. 5 minutes, the tech said. She exhaled. Thought of her mother watching from home. Thought of her district, their letters, their prayers. The people who stopped her in grocery stores to say, don't let them talk over you. She'd stay calm. But maybe, just maybe, tonight wasn't about calm. It was about clarity. The countdown began. Jesse started with his usual clipped monologue. Jasmine said nothing. Jess watched. When she tilted her head and answered, it was with the kind of precision you earn not with airtime, but with truth. And when the screen went live, this wasn't just to talking heads. It was something deeper. It was about power, about who gets to speak, and who refuses to be silenced.
Here's a rewritten version of your powerful scene with heightened dramatic flow, deeper character psychology, and smoother pacing crafted for a high-impact narrative or script-style presentation. She's already on, Tech said. Jesse glanced up, half annoyed. Already? Yep. Logged in early. That didn't sit right with him. Jesse liked to own the room before it opened. Preferred guests who waited for their cue, who entered on his time. But there she was, Jasmine Crockett, already in frame, sitting with perfect posture, whispering something off camera, calm as still water, unshaken. The producer leaned in. Keep it tight. Ratings spike when it's tense, not chaotic. Don't go off script, unless she does. Jesse forced a smirk. She blinked first. He muttered. He believed it. He always believed it. Because in Jesse's world, that's how it worked. Aggressive questions, calculated interruptions, and just enough smugness to tilt the game. He'd done this dozens of times, sharpen the blade, push the guest, and walk away looking like the composed one. But something about tonight felt off. The control room dimmed. Final checks. Countdown 3, 2, 1. Live. Welcome back to the show, Jesse said, voice crisp. We're joined tonight by Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who's been pushing what some are calling a reform bill, what others argue is a backdoor way of rewarding lawlessness. The framing was sharp, deliberate. Jasmine didn't blink. That's an interesting interpretation, Jesse, she said coolly. But if you've read the bill, which I assume you have viewed, no, it does nothing of the sort. Jesse chuckled. Assume? Careful, Congresswoman? Don't want to come off as condescending? Jasmine smiled, not performative, just precise. It's not condescension when it's rooted in facts. In the control room, silence. Even the floor manager looked up. Jesse shifted, the rhythm slipping just a beat. Still, he pressed forward. So let's get this straight, he said. You're saying this bill helps victims of police overreach, but doesn't tie law enforcement's hands? Exactly, Jasmine replied. It holds everyone accountable, including those with a badge. That's not favoritism. That's the job. No grandstanding. No grin for the camera. Just clarity, calm, control. Backstage, Jesse's assistant leaned in toward a monitor. He's losing the segment. And he was. Because every time Jesse tried to corner her, Jasmine didn't deflect, she redirected. With receipts, with logic, the kind of poise that makes people forget they're watching cable news. You want to talk about public safety, she asked. Let's talk about how polling locations have been systematically removed from low-income communities. That reduces civic participation, which leads to policy stagnation, which fuels the systemic conditions that make communities less safe. That sentence alone lit up the Fox News livestream chat. Jesse glanced at his notes, then at the camera. So, basically, you're saying crime is a result of bad voting logistics? Jasmine lifted her chin. No, I'm saying crime doesn't happen in a vacuum. And if you want to debate policy, start with the roots, not just the symptoms. The control room exchanged glances. The producer mouthed, "Wrap it." But Jesse stayed in it now, running on ego, not strategy. This wasn't about the bill anymore. It was personal. He leaned in. You're saying the police are the problem. I'm saying abuse of power is the problem, she said without flinching, and power without accountability. That's how democracies erode. There it was. The moment. The one that would be clipped, shared, replayed a million times. Jesse's reply wouldn't matter. Internet had already chosen its quote. But then came the second segment. Supposed to be lighter talking points about rising urban crime, the alleged dangers of criminal justice reform, the left abandoning law enforcement. Jesse had done this dance before, only this time. The floor beneath him felt like it was missing screws. Congresswoman, he started, a jab laced in civility. With all due respect, it's hard to take a bill seriously when the very communities it claims to protect are seeing more crime and fewer convictions. Doesn't that suggest your strategy is failing? Jasmine leaned in ever so slightly, still calm. You're asking the wrong question, she said. It's not about whether crime exists. It's about whether we keep using broken tools to fix it and expect different results. That's not policy. That's performance. Boom, Twitter exploded. Jesse forced a smile, but his eyes twitched. He said, voice clipped, but let me ask you this. You already did, she cut in. Something cracked. Not in her, in him. The camera caught it. The microsecond his confidence faltered. His eyes flicked toward the countdown clock, but it was too late. Jasmine wasn't reacting anymore. She was steering. You want to talk about crime? Then let's talk about the corporations your network protects, companies that lobby against environmental regulations, poison poor neighborhoods, and get tax breaks to do it. She let the silence sit. That's criminal, she added. But no one's policing that. Dead air. For the first time all night, Jesse had no comeback. He stammered. We're talking about street crime, not corporations. Oh, Jasmine said. So now we're deciding which crimes matter. The studio froze. Even the cue director stopped signaling. Jesse tried to cut to commercial early, but the segment was locked. 2 more minutes. He leaned back, arms crossed, reaching for sarcasm. Congresswoman, you've clearly got rehearsed lines for everything. Jasmine shook her head. No smile, just truth. No, I've got lived experience for everything. Chat feed flipped. What started as a debate had become something else entirely. Viewers weren't watching for zingers. They were watching someone refuse to shrink, refuse to play by the rules of a rigged format. People are tired, Jasmine said. Tired of being talked over, talked down to. Tired of watching bills die while families bury loved ones. Tired of being labeled angry when they're simply not backing down. Oh, Jesse's face turned red. He interrupted. Let's not turn this into a race thing. She cut him clean. You did that the moment you assumed. I didn't know what I was talking about. That line dropped. Like a McCann in the control room, no one moved. Here is a polished and powerfully rewritten version of your scene, maintaining its emotional intensity. While enhancing the pacing, clarity, and storytelling rhythm, the executive producer dropped his headset and muttered under his breath, We've lost this one, and they had us. Jesse knew it too, because in the final seconds of the segment, he stopped interrupting not out of grace, but because he didn't know where to go next. He had run out of script, out of rhythm, out of control. The director finally rolled the brake. The screen faded to black, but the damage had already been done. 30 minutes later, segment landed on YouTube, clipped, subtitled, shared, not just by activists or journalists, but by everyday viewers, left, right, and center. Even Jesse's usual supporters didn't know what to make of it. It didn't feel like a debate, felt like a reckoning, like a moment Jesse wasn't prepared for, and a guest who didn't wait for space, but took it. But the real storm didn't happen on set. It happened after, online, in comments, in living rooms, in places neither Jesse nor Jasmine could control. Before the end credits had even rolled, Twitter was already ablaze. A student in Tucson clipped Jasmine's line, "Power without checks is how democracies erode," and posted it less than 3 minutes after airtime. Within 10 minutes, it was everywhere. 500,000 views, growing by the second. By the hour mark, hashtag Crockett Cooked Fox was trending alongside Watters' meltdown memes. Flooded timelines. One showed Jesse's blank stare captioned, "When the law degree fights back." Another, side by side, frames Jesse fumbling, Jasmine calmly delivering facts, labeled unbothered and bulletproof. But beneath the humor was something else. In the comments, people shared stories. Grandmothers who still double-checked their IDs before voting. Who had been stopped by police with no explanation. Young people who'd only seen their communities acknowledged when it was time to harvest votes. People weren't just reacting to that moment. They were reacting to years of being silenced, ignored, reduced to a statistic in Oakland. A community organizer named Lenny posted the clip with the caption, "This wasn't a debate. This was a reminder." She didn't shout, she didn't perform. She just refused to shrink. And even in unlikely corners of the internet forums not known for progressive takes, the tone had shifted. A retired police officer in Flagstaff commented, "I don't agree with her politics, but I'll be honest, she held her ground like I haven't seen in a long time." That wasn't a takedown. That was presence. Meanwhile, Jesse's team scrambled. First step, silence. No tweets, no statements. Wait it out. Let the noise burn off. But the silence backfired. Speculation filled the void. Was Jesse reprimanded? Would Fox edit the replay? Would they even keep the full segment online? The quiet suggested something had gone wrong behind the scenes, something they weren't ready to admit. On Jasmine's side, there was no celebration. She sat alone at her kitchen table, cold coffee in hand, phone face down. Tasha, her assistant, hovered. At the laptop, tabs open everywhere. "You're everywhere," she said. "CNN's running the clip. MSNBC quoted you. View just reached out." Jasmine exhaled slowly. "I didn't even say anything new." "Exactly," Tasha said. "You just said it without asking for permission." That truth hit hard. For Jasmine, the moment was bittersweet. She didn't want to be a headline. She wanted the legislation to be. But that's not how the machine works. People remembered the confrontation, the calm, the silence. The look on Jesse's face when he realized she wouldn't fold. What they didn't remember is the name of the bill, but that too was starting to change. In Ohio, a group of college students launched a TikTok campaign using the hashtag H7892- shorthand for her bill. Their goal: get people talking about what the legislation actually did, not just who spoke louder on screen. Within 48 hours, it had momentum. Real momentum. Back on Jesse's side, the pressure was mounting, conservative. Outlets tried to frame the moment differently. Crockett throws temper tantrum on Fox, one headline claimed. Another called it just another leftist overreaction. But the footage didn't lie. That was the problem. The raw clip refused to disappear. Every time it circulated, the spin unraveled further. 2 days later, Jesse finally issued a statement. It was short, corporate, and cautious. While we encourage spirited debate on all sides, last night's segment was marked by a lack of decorum from our guest. That one line, lack of decorum, sparked its own firestorm. Lack of decorum is when we stop apologizing for knowing our facts, one tweet read. Translation: she didn't bow. Another said the video had hit a nerve, a cultural fault line. It was no longer just about a bill, or Jesse, or even Jasmine. It was about voice, space, and who gets to speak without being shut down. But with that visibility came vulnerability, and the higher Jasmine's star rose, the more targeted she was about to become. What came next wouldn't be a debate. It would be something else entirely. Here's your rewritten passage, tightened for dramatic impact. With enhanced pacing, emotional depth, and narrative clarity, it was no longer just chatter. It was a warning. By the third day, the buzz hadn't faded, it had grown teeth. Fox News. Executives were now cycling through internal calls every few hours, scrambling to contain a story that had spiraled beyond their control. What began as a calculated ambush of a first-term congresswoman had morphed into a national flashpoint, one that, in their eyes, made Jesse look flustered, unprepared, and worst of all, beaten at his own game. Inside the building, the mood was tense. The senior producer who greenlit the segment had already been hauled into a closed-door meeting. Jesse wasn't returning calls. By Wednesday, the media relations team had drafted 3 possible responses. None were approved. Meanwhile, Jesse sat in his darkened office, alone, watching the segment again and again, looking for an angle. Some stumble, a misplaced word, a flicker of emotion, anything he could spin. Anything to make Jasmine look unstable, disrespectful, or just plain wrong. But there was nothing. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't strayed off topic. She hadn't even looked angry. She had simply held the line. Calm, direct, controlled. And that more than anything was what stung. It wasn't a meltdown. It wasn't a shouting match. It was quiet. It was decisive. On the other side, Jasmine's team was overwhelmed with requests. Podcasts, talk shows, Al papers, national platforms. Everyone wanted a quote, a follow-up, a replay of the moment. But Jasmine wasn't biting. If I walk around acting like I won something, she told her staff, it means the fight is over. And it's not. She kept her head down. But staying grounded didn't shield her from what was coming. That evening, her communications director, Keon, stepped into her office with a tablet in hand. You're not going to like this, he showed her a thread from a far-right forum. Users were posting old photos from college, cherry-picked quotes from decade-old Facebook posts. Even her past legal casework was being dissected facts, twisted into dangerous sound bites. They're building a narrative, Keon said. They can't attack the clip, so they're coming after you. Jasmine nodded, dragging me back to the stereotype. Exactly. Angry, unqualified, unpredictable. The next morning, it began to show. 2 conservative blogs posted exposes with headlines like, "Who really is Jasmine Crockett? What the media won't tell you about the Congresswoman from Texas," laced with exaggeration, innuendo, and guilt by association. Her team sprang into action, fact-checking, issuing corrections, flagging disinformation. But once a story hits social, media true or false, it spreads like smoke. On Jesse's side, damage control took another shape. He appeared on a different Fox segment that night. Calmer, smiling, polished. But the tension showed in the corners of his eyes. When asked about the viral exchange, he laughed it off. It's showbiz, folks. People get fired up. That's why we watch. But anyone who had seen the clip knew this wasn't showbiz. It was real. And behind that laugh was a simmering humiliation. Jesse's frustration had turned to retaliation. He quietly told his staff to start digging into Jasmine's donors, her voting record. Any contradiction they could find. He didn't say it aloud, but the message was clear. She embarrassed him. There would be consequences, and Jasmine felt it. The tone in emails changed. Meeting requests disappeared. A few donors went silent. She wasn't surprised. That's how it works. She told Keon, You speak clearly, and they act like you screamed. You make a point, and they say you pulled a knife. The game had changed. This wasn't about one interview anymore. It was about what happens when someone doesn't fold, and what systems rise up to punish that refusal, and it was about to get uglier. It started with a knock. Jasmine had just wrapped a local Rodnew interview, her first public appearance since the Fox segment aired. Her assistant Tasha entered, pale-faced, holding her phone. "You need to see this." The screen showed a cancellation notice. Subject line: "Confirmation of canceled event, safety concerns noted." It was a keynote she had accepted months ago, a bipartisan youth voter summit in Indianapolis. The message was vague, clear enough. "Given the current climate surrounding Congresswoman Crockett's media coverage, we have decided to proceed without guest speakers this year." Blah. Jasmine read it, handed the phone back, and said quietly, "So it begins." But it didn't end there. Within 48 hours, 4 more cancellations followed. A school visit in Austin, a panel in Minneapolis, 2 fundraisers quietly pulled by nervous hosts. Then the messages started. At first it was trolls, fake names, anonymous email accounts, accusations that she was playing the victim. But by Thursday night, it escalated. An envelope arrived at her Dallas district office. Inside, a newspaper clipping with her face circled in red ink. A handwritten note: "Keep talking. We'll make sure you're silenced for good." The staff filed a report. The FBI opened a case. Security was increased. Still, Jasmine showed no cracks. She walked the halls of Congress like she always had. That day, she posted just once: a black and white photo of Shirley Chisholm. Caption: "They will come for your voice before they come for your seat." But behind the scenes, the weight was growing. Her mother, Darlene, called that weekend, crying, "Why do they hate you so much, baby? You didn't yell. You didn't even get mad. You just told the truth." Jasmine had no answer. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't backlash. It was strategy. Calculated, precise. A warning to anyone who might speak up next. Meanwhile, Jesse wasn't coasting either. Clips from his past resurfaced. Old remarks, casual, but now seen with sharper eyes. His tone with women of color. The interruptions. The smugger, meaned independent media began calling out patterns. Picture emerged one he couldn't laugh away. During a Fox conference call, a senior exec asked bluntly, "Did you underestimate her?" Jesse bristled. "I didn't underestimate. I expected a debate, not a TED Talk." But the question lingered. It echoed through the headlines. Flattened, outclassed, disarmed. And deep down, Jesse knew the worst part wasn't that he lost the segment. It's that he'd finally met someone who didn't blink. Here's your rewritten passage, crafted for deeper emotional resonance, smoother pacing, and stronger narrative flow. It maintains the integrity of the original events while elevating the tone and clarity. He hated how they made him look like he'd been schooled. Behind the scenes, Jesse's team began whispering to sympathetic blogs. They planted stories suggesting Jasmine had rehearsed every line, that Jesse hadn't been briefed properly, that she'd somehow ambushed him. None of it stuck. The footage didn't lie. The audience didn't buy the spin, but Jesse wasn't used to being on defense. And when he felt cornered, he lashed out. One night during a live taping, he launched into a monologue titled, "The Real Faces of False Outrage." He didn't say her name, but everyone knew who he meant. He painted a picture of performative politicians, people who, in his words, weaponize identity and milk the media for sympathy points. His tone was laced with sarcasm. He smirked through it. But for viewers who had seen the original interview, it didn't land. If anything, it made him look smaller, bitter, thin-skinned. Even some of his loyal fans began to shift. "Why are you still talking about this? Feels like she got under your skin, Jesse." And she had. Because this wasn't just a story anymore. It had become a symbol. And it wasn't going away now. The cost wasn't just political. It was personal. Sunday morning arrived quiet but heavy. Jasmine Crockett sat cross-legged on her couch in an oversized college sweatshirt. Her tea sat untouched on the table, cooling with every minute. Her phone buzzed endlessly, notifications piling up. She didn't check them. Across the room, her mother Darlene watched her. "You ever think about just walking away from all this?" she asked softly. Jasmine didn't answer right away. Outside, a few neighborhood kids rode bikes and laughed, proof that somewhere normal life still existed, just not here. "Sometimes," she said finally, "but not today." Her voice didn't crack, but the exhaustion beneath her eyes said the rest. That morning, her office had received 2 more voicemails, both from blocked numbers, both referencing her Fox appearance. One described her outfit in chilling detail. The other ended with a warning, "You're not untouchable." She listened to them once, then again, and deleted them. Keon had suggested hiring private security for her next out-of-state event. Tasha wanted to cancel travel altogether, but Jasmine said no. If I'd let them rattle me, they've already won. Even she wasn't sure she believed it anymore. Across the country, in Los Angeles, Jesse wasn't faring much better. He'd snapped at his assistant in a meeting, walked off set mid-recording, ignored 2 media team requests for interviews. Whispers started circulating. He looked burnt out. Worse, he looked humiliated. He hadn't taken a public loss like this in years. The night before, his wife Camille had asked, "Do you regret doing this segment?" He scoffed. "No, I regret losing it." That answer stuck with her, not how it happened, not why. Just that it happened. In Jesse's mind, it wasn't supposed to end like this. He was the one who stayed in control. He steered, he interrupted. He dominated. Now he was the one being dissected, frame by frame. He spent hours reading Reddit threads, YouTube breakdowns. One user analyzed his body language. Another did a 10-minute deep dive on every interruption, only to conclude, Jasmine never interrupted at all. The internet wasn't letting it go. Jesse couldn't block it out. One night he just turned off his phone, sat in the dark, and let the silence swallow him. His pride wasn't bruised, it was fractured. Not because he lost a debate, he'd survived tough interviews before, but because this time he had no real defense. He tried writing comebacks, snappy rebuttals. None of them fit. Meanwhile, Jasmine was paying a price of a different kind. She found herself questioning the little things. How she dressed, how she smiled, whether her voice sounded too firm or not warm enough. Being public and being picked apart weren't new, but now it was relentless. One afternoon, she got a call from a local organizer in Fort Worth, someone she'd mentored years ago. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said. "You gave a whole lot of us permission to stop shrinking." Jasmine blinked hard. "I didn't mean to start all this," she said quietly. "You didn't," the woman replied. "You just stopped apologizing." Still, sleep was hard to come by. Every night, she heard the same phrases echo in her head. Lack of decorum, aggressive, playing the victim. Words never said on air, but everywhere in the aftermath. The attacks weren't just digital now. Her younger brother was followed home from work. A relative's number was leaked. Porters began contacting old classmates digging, and yet Jasmine kept showing up. Town halls, budget hearings, House floor votes. She walked in tall, spoke clearly, and refused to shrink. Because her decision was already made, she wasn't going quiet. But something unexpected had begun to stir, and it wasn't coming from pundits or politicians. It was coming from everyday people who saw something different in that broadcast. By midweek, the conversation had spilled far beyond cable news. The moment had reached kitchen tables, classrooms, barbershops, and church halls. It wasn't just about a bill. It wasn't about 2 people arguing. It had become something else. At Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa, a social studies teacher paused her lesson and played the clip. The students watched in silence. When it ended, one girl raised her hand. "Why do they act like it's wrong to be that confident if you're black?" Silence. Then a boy in the back muttered, "Because they don't expect it." No further explanation needed. The lesson had already happened. In Cleveland. A retired nurse named Gloria shuffled cards at her weekly game night. "We usually laugh," she said. But this week, we talked about her. She spoke like she didn't need anyone's permission, Gloria said. Haven't seen that kind of backbone since Barbara Jordan, another woman added. She made that man blink. On his own show? They laughed. But it wasn't just amusement. It was recognition. These weren't just supporters of Jasmine Crockett. They were women who had lived it being cut off, talked over, underestimated. And they knew exactly what it meant to hold your ground when the rules weren't written for you. Even in more conservative places, something had shifted. At a barber shop in Idaho Falls, an older white man folded his paper. That woman never raised her voice, he said. Not once. And still made him look foolish. You gotta respect that. It was happening everywhere. People weren't debating party lines. They were responding to a feeling. The feeling of seeing someone keep their dignity while being poked, prodded, and tested on live television. And then came the emails. Hundreds. Piling into Jasmine's office. Not hate. Not noise. Gratitude. A grandmother in New Mexico. Thank you for defending the truth without theatrics. A student in Detroit. You gave me the courage to speak up in class. Postal worker in Fresno. I saw you. I heard you. Thank you. Jasmine read every single one. Some made her smile. Some made her cry. And one, from a woman in Kentucky, made her stop completely. My daughter is 9. Here's your rewritten version of the passage. Polished, emotionally grounded, and elevated in tone and clarity. While preserving the depth and message of the original, my daughter asked me if you were that man's boss, the email read. I told her, no, sweetie, she was just brave enough not to let him be the boss of her. That line hit Jasmine square in the chest, because that's what people had seen. Bravery, not bravado. It wasn't Raji, it was restraint. The backlash that followed only sharpened that contrast. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't insulted. She'd simply refused to let anyone else define the terms of her presence. Even Jesse felt the shift. His inbox wasn't just full of criticism from progressives. Some of his longtime viewers were quietly disappointed, not because he lost, but because he seemed more obsessed with being right than being respectful. One message from a veteran in Pennsylvania stuck with him. Son, we all make mistakes on air. But when you don't know how to admit one, that's when you start looking small. Don't let your pride make you petty. Jesse never replied, but he printed it out, folded it carefully, and slid it into his desk drawer. The buzz eventually quieted, but the ripple it left behind kept spreading. Teachers started building lesson plans around it. Podcasts unpacked it line by line, tone by tone. Even lawmakers mentioned it on the floor, not to grandstand, but to discuss something often overlooked, tone. Because tone isn't neutral. It's a weapon used to elevate some, silence others. What happened between Jesse and Jasmine didn't just fade with the news cycle. Stayed because it reminded people of themselves, of boardrooms and classrooms, of traffic stops and job interviews, where they'd had to prove they deserved space they were already standing in. But the final word wouldn't come from a viral clip. It would come from what Jasmine chose to do next. 2 weeks later, the headlines had moved on. The trending hashtags faded. Cable news found its next outrage, its next off-the-cuff remark, its next political misstep. But something about that exchange between Jesse Watters and Jasmine Crockett had left a mark not in media, but in people. Jasmine felt it wherever she went. At an education roundtable in Tempe, teacher pulled her aside and whispered, "You made my daughter believe she could run for office." In a grocery store in St. Louis, a cashier asked for a photo not because she followed politics, but because you reminded me I'm not crazy. It didn't feel like fame. It felt like resonance. But that resonance came at a cost. Her security detail remained tight. Her emails were still heavily screened. The smear attempts hadn't stopped, only slowed. Anytime she posted online, someone twisted her words, called her names, told her to calm down. She didn't stop, but she learned to pause. To breathe before she responded. To think before pressing send. Because it was never about a single interview. It was about what that moment unlocked and what it threatened. In interviews, she never took shots at Jesse. She wouldn't take the bait. When asked about the segment, she'd simply say, "It wasn't about winning. It was about being heard." And people remembered that. Meanwhile, Jesse returned to his regular programming. The lights, the tone, the rhythm, it's all the same. But some viewers noticed he wasn't. He interrupted less, asked more follow-up questions, even conceded occasionally. During one panel, speaking to a guest he clearly disagreed with, Jesse said something unexpected. "You're not wrong. Just think you're starting from a different truth." The moment passed quickly, never clipped, never viral. But it happened. He never mentioned Jasmine Crockett again, not publicly, not directly. But off camera, he confided to a colleague, "She didn't humiliate me. She just didn't need me to validate her. And that's what threw me." That line never made headlines. Didn't need to. Back in Dallas, Jasmine stood behind a podium at a packed town hall, in her hands a printed copy of the bill that had started at OHR 7892. It's the one that never got the airtime it deserved. She read, "A section allowed not to a committee, not to a network, but to the people, nurses, teachers, teenagers, sitting cross-legged on the floor." When she finished, she looked up. This bill is about accountability. It's not just in law enforcement, but in media, in politics, in ourselves. Silence followed. Then a woman in the second row raised her hand and asked, "How do you stay calm when everyone's coming at you?" Jasmine smiled. "I don't always stay calm, but I stay clear. Because when they come for your tone, it's usually because they can't touch your truth." That line, "they can't touch your truth," would soon appear on t-shirts, sold too. Fund local civic engagement programs, not because it was catchy, because it felt earned. The viral moment had passed, but the impact remained. People remembered what it felt like to see someone hold the line, to watch a woman speak with a kind of clarity that doesn't ask for permission. And in the end, this wasn't just about race or gender or politics. It was about space, who's allowed to take it, who's expected to shrink. And what happens when someone refuses to follow the script? Neither of them walked away unchanged. Jesse learned what it means to be challenged by someone who doesn't play. To the crowd, Jasmine learned how much louder the world gets when you stop apologizing. And the rest of us? We were reminded that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse to be small. If this story stirred something in you, pride, anger, hope, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Talk about it. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because the truth deserves more than just one moment. It deserves a platform.